I talked about a special guest who we're going to have on the show. Nas executive produced and narrated a project called Smoke. It's a documentary. It's a new documentary called Smoke, Marijuana plus Black America. And it's directed by somebody I really, truly respect, Erik Parker, who's going to be with us momentarily. But I wanted to talk about this, Heather, because, as marijuana is becoming legal across various states, and it's different places where you could go smoke a joint in public and nobody will bother you, in other places where you can't. It's
Mm-hmm.
federally, it's not legal. So you could be in a part of a growth state, let's say like Maine is a growth state, so it's legal for you to grow in that state, and you could create multiple farms. But if the federal,
Beautiful.
yeah, but if the federal government wants to come in and confiscate all of that for whatever reason, you're always at the mercy of that. And it's a lot of black market politics that goes in the cannabis industry, especially when it comes to public officials, when it comes to issuing out licensing for dispensaries or whatever the case may be. And now you got a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people in jail for crimes that are no longer crimes. And you got a lot of the people, the lawmakers who put them in jail, who are now
Wow.
benefiting from this cannabis industry. And
Crazy,
so
right?
it's crazy. So Erik Parker, Nas, they put together this project along with Ricky Williams, the pro football player. I'm gonna play the trailer, but I want to ask the citizens if you know anyone who's in jail for possession of marijuana, or folks who are trying to really enter into this industry and you're reaching a lot of roadblocks. I want you to expose it because there's some inequities in this business that we're going to touch on when we talk with Erik Parker next. So if you got any questions, 888-742-3345. Take a listen to this.
America's war on drugs was a war on our people. The battlegrounds were our hoods, and our communities felt the pain. Today, with the criminalization of marijuana, the war continues.
This is just a clip airing today at 10 p.m. I want to bring on the air, Heather B. This is somebody I worked with Viacom, MTV for years. This dude used
Okay.
to do the Parker Report, what was his groundbreaking platform that he created himself. He went on to become a director, writer, producer. He did the Nas, This Time Is Illmatic documentary. He did the Talk, Race in America doc. He did On Tour with Meek Mill. All of these things. L.A. Burning, the riots 25 years later. Hip-hop, the songs that shook America. Death Row Stories. And now Smoke, Marijuana plus Black America. Please welcome Erik Parker, EP.
Yeah,
What's up, Erik?
peace, Heather B.
Peace, family.
I'm calling in from New Jerusalem. You hear that?
Jersey.
Now, where's that at, E? Is that near Oakland?
You know what?
E,
Hey,
man.
that's the greatest introduction I've ever heard or ever received. Thank you for that, and thank you for all your work, brother. We really appreciate you out here.
Oh man, hey man, listen. Hey, I'm thrilled to introduce you to the world if they don't already know you from your great work, the groundbreaking work you've done. Erik is someone I watched just really evolve in this media world. Have to be, as a
Mm-hmm.
journalist, but true journalist. It's guys like him, guys like Bonsu, guys like Rob Markman. It's a few guys that are still out there that are what I call true, complete journalists who produce, they write, they're journalists that they direct. They bring stories to the forefront the right way. They do fact checking. They do researching. They have a narrative thread that runs through it that lets you stay engaged from beginning to end. That's what EP does. So, Erik,
And,
congratulations.
and, and thank you. And Sway is our leader. But yeah. So
Okay,
no,
okay.
but off of that, though, this documentary really is something special to me and to all of us who made it. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk about it.
Uh-huh. Well, let's talk about it, man. I've been actually, I got friends who are in the business. And Ricky, let's talk about Ricky Williams, who was a former football running back. You guys may remember him. He played in the
Of
NFL. He also
course.
played in the Canadian League. And Ricky Williams is a part of this. And I remember years ago, Erik, when Ricky was playing in the game and he was being suspended, and all
Mm-hmm.
his headlines, they talked about his dirty test and they stigmatized him. They vilified him for being someone who used cannabis, but they didn't know that even though he had a social anxiety disorder, they really ran him through the ringer. You remember them days?
I do, and it's a sad thing because when I got to talk to Ricky Williams, you could see this man who, when he used to do interviews, he used to wear a helmet because he didn't really want people to kind of get close to him or kind of know him. He's just the nicest guy, but marijuana helped him in a lot of ways with his disorders, and the league when he got so he had a dirty test when it came to marijuana because it should be noted that when you're looking at marijuana and testing in professional sports, the NFL and the NBA, which are predominantly black, are policed way higher than the NHL and which is hockey and baseball league, and which is predominantly white and non-black. Even the NHL doesn't even test or consider it a banned substance. So people like Ricky Williams paid the price for and for a lot of what we're seeing today, where some of these leagues are starting to loosen up some of their policies. But he was one of the pioneers when it came to this. He left the league. Because he didn't want to get his name dragged through the mud. He was like, I got a dirty test. I'm going to leave the league. And he went and started studying marijuana, medicine, and he started studying how to use herbs to help himself and help others. And that's what he does today.
Mm-hmm. That's what he does today. Now, here's the dichotomy of substances. Marijuana, you're labeled as a villain. You're labeled as a lowlife. You're a criminal because you may utilize cannabis. In this case, it was for medicinal purposes. Opioids, if you get addicted or to opioids, or you become an opioid user, you're labeled as a patient.
Right.
Yeah.
The thing about because in the doc we talk about this in a lot of different ways. Because only one of the aspects is in professional sports, and the reason why that was one of the aspects we wanted to cover is to show how it disproportionately affects black and brown people, even in realms like sports. When you think that somebody's privileged, they have money, people idolize them, they look up to them. But if you're black in a professional sports, you're likely in basketball or NFL, and you're getting tested and vilified for it. Now, the thing about it is a lot of these athletes, in particular football, they use marijuana because it helps them with pain. So they don't use opioids. We talked to Mike James, who used to be a professional football player, who was addicted to opioids, and he asked for an exemption use of marijuana because he didn't want to take opioids for pain. And they denied him. They wouldn't allow it.
Wow, and these are the inequities that we're talking about, and I want to talk about too. Let's talk about how cannabis has been criminalized and who's actually serving time in jail for cannabis and who's actually profiting, because this industry is expected to generate $30 billion in sales within the next 5 years. The cannabis industry is going to it's probably more than 30 billion. I think that's a low projection right there.
I think that's low.
I also think it's low, but that's what some of the projections were. But now that it's leading to so many more legalizations, 5 states have just legalized cannabis through ballot measure, including New Jersey. So that leaves some form of legalization to like 36 states in the country. So it's a snowballing into full legalization at some point, and we know that's going to happen. The sad thing is that there are still people in jail today for selling or possessing marijuana, and they're disproportionately black and brown people.
Yeah, they tucked us away, HB, for carrying a joint. And these people are still serving time. $30 billion in sales in 2025, and only 4.3% of dispensaries are currently owned by black folks, which I think that number is lower. I think it's lower than 4.3.
Well, so the thing is, you're talking about dispensaries, and that's the thing, because dispensaries are, and it probably is lower now because they're getting pushed out. The thing about also one of the aspects we talk about in smoke is this business, because that's somewhat where the future is headed in cannabis business. And I heard you guys talking about it earlier, and you touched on some of these things about, black and brown people are being pushed out of the business, even though we were disproportionately affected by the criminality of it. So there's a movement, and what's happening is there's a movement towards legalization. And if we don't open our eyes and understand that this is not us being able to smoke, us being able to smoke freely, but also what's going to happen with the money that's created from this great industry. Are we going to use that to affect those communities that have been disproportionately harmed by the drug laws? Or are we going to just allow it to go to big profit, the big corporations that are coming in and now all of a sudden making money off of it?
It's scary. And then what do you do with those who are in jail for things that are no longer considered crimes? And they spend a year, they spend 2 years in jail, they spend however much time they spent in jail. What's the restorative component of that? How do you pay them back? You know?
Exactly. So that's the hard thing that we need to have these conversations. So this documentary, the whole idea was to get people to start thinking outside of just legalization and what it means to them in terms of just being able to smoke or being able to get your medicine. I mean, there's so many more issues surrounding it. For example, we talked to Illinois Governor Pritzker, who said the only reason why we decided to legalize is for social justice. So they immediately let out 10,000 people out of jail with pardons so they can begin to get their lives back. And that's just one step in the pathway. And they had to do some kind of set aside to some kind of mechanism for you to be able to get licenses. You have to have this many people or this amount of percentage of people who were from a certain community or who were affected in some way. And the other thing, there were times like in LA, they're fighting for what they call social equity. There's a few entrepreneurs who are also advocates, and they've been fighting for what they call social equity. But it technically seems to be a losing fight. But there are some small gains. Like there are places where you could not work in the cannabis industry if you had a record. Now we talked today to Freeway Ricky Ross, who was a drug kingpin from the 80s. Now he has a cannabis license because he was able to use that, his this social equity program. If you've had a record, you can still work in this business. So there are some gains.
There is some gains. Erik Parker is here, and he directed the new documentary "Smoke Marijuana Plus Black America" is premiering tonight at 10 p.m. Erik, I'm a bring in a former queen of the chocolate tie smokers back in her heyday, Heather B.
You know what, Sway? That ain't even, listen. Look, I don't smoke anymore.
Heather B, you did talk about that chocolate tie. You did
because I was a fan, and I'm still a fan, and they just don't make it like they used to. That chocolate tie was special. That's why that music was the way it was during that era in the 90s, because that tie, yo, it was crazy. But anyway, E, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for the doc. I think it's necessary as I begin to have more and more conversations, actually with family members and the younger ones that's in college right now who are literally considering going into this industry as a business. They're learning business skills and learning about the industry and looking at that right now as a form of income in their future, and I think that's a beautiful thing. Although I don't smoke anymore, I support it. I support all of it. I voted for it to become legal here in the state of New Jersey, and so I'm just happy about it. But I'm wondering why you were doing this doc. What was the most surprising thing that you personally learned from it and doing your research and talking to people? What did you find out while talking to people doing this doc?
I think one of the most surprising things is really, again, concerns the business because it's constantly evolving. I didn't know there were so many barriers for entry to the business. I didn't know that, the banks did not allow for loans. So while they'll say, okay, a state might say we made it legal and we want to set aside some kind of program for minority communities to get businesses, they still need about $1 to $5 million to get a dispensary going. So you can fill out all the licenses you want, but you're going to have to go to a white man with a hedge fund or big money for them to actually be the controllers or owners or get the money. And a lot of times you will not be able to get that loan from some private source. And banks are not allowed to loan it to you because it's illegal federally. And we talked to Senator Kamala Harris, who's now Vice President Kamala Harris, in this doc. She has a very heavy presence in this doc. And she is very pro legalization and social equity. And she wants to repair these harms that have been done with the use of marijuana money. But the president, Joe Biden, who's the president, he's a little bit more reluctant. He wants to decriminalize it, but he also wants to wait and see before we have full legalization. So I think some of the policies need to be looked at, but surrounding the business, we're all on the same page mostly when it comes to decriminalization. Everybody thinks that should happen, but when it comes to repairing the business, we do have to start looking at the ways in which we can do that. That's restorative.
Man, Eric Parker is here. That's restorative. That's because let's be honest, man, black and brown folks created the industry. We created, you know what I mean? We created the infrastructure. We created the distribution channels. We created the, the engagement. We created the curiosity, people going into different components of it, whether it's medicinal, whether it's, extracting, whatever it is. You might just be a grower. You might just do edibles. You might be a baker.
Right, absolutely. And now that it's legal, the people who created this industry are being pushed aside. They've been warehoused and now being pushed aside. So people like John Boehner, who now is investing heavily and had an opportunity to make it legal, opportunity to promote legislation that could ease some of the restrictions. Now that he's out of Congress and out of power, he's making money off of it, and people are still being pushed aside.
Isn't that crazy? That's the world we live in. But we calling all that shit out. That's why you should watch this doc tonight on BT at 10 p.m. Jared's on the line from Denver. Grand Risings, Jared. Say hello to Eric Parker.
Hey, Eric, Sway, Heather B. How are y'all doing? Good morning.
Hey, how you doing?
Peace.
So I just wanted to chime in. I'm actually an attorney out here in Colorado. And what y'all were just talking about is exactly it. Minorities, black and brown people, they were arrested heavily and charged with, allegedly, distributing, growing, manufacturing, building the industry, like you said. And now that they have those charges, what would be dubbed experts are kept out of the industry.
Yeah.
In every other industry, it's like, oh, you created a entire distribution network on your own, coming from low income. They get praise, they get funding, but when it comes to marijuana and stuff like that, it's like, oh no, you can't do it. You're kept out. You're a drug dealer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's so crazy. Sway, where did you said the caller was from Colorado?
He's from Denver.
Okay.
That's a legal state. Yeah.
Right. So how interesting is this, citizen? Thank you for calling. Sway and I were in Denver some years ago for the fest that they have for 420, and we actually hopped in a Uber to go eat. And the Uber driver was telling us how initially he was disappointed at his daughter for dropping out of college and starting this dispensary. Sway, you remember this conversation?
I remember this, yeah.
Yeah. So he was so disappointed in her initially. And he said after about a year and a half, he could not believe how successful and everything that she became. So it's funny, fast forward 3 years later, to hear you saying all of this, being from Denver and being an attorney. And this was a white older gentleman talking about this, and he couldn't even believe how successful his daughter became. So it's interesting where we are now with this.
Now, the irony is, Heather, is that the white man's daughter could jump in this industry in 1 year and become successful, whereas people who've been doing this for decades that can't even do it, they can't even do it above board. They have to do it illegitimately, because the other thing, and Jared, maybe you could speak to this, and Eric, if you found this out, it ain't easy. They make it different. Eric, you talked how that the loans, the banks won't give you loans unless you sitting on $1 million or $2 million.
And it gets even worse. On top of that, the federal, since Eric, he mentioned, the banks won't do it because it's federally illegal. The tax code is also federally mandated. So marijuana businesses, even if you get through the hurdles of having the, now you can't get so a normal business gets to take out expenses for, their employees and health, all those business expenses. Now marijuana businesses, they don't get to take out any of that. So some of those businesses, like he was saying, that take time to get profitable, is because even though they're selling $1 million in marijuana, they're paying $1.5 million in taxes.
There's a very good. I'm sorry. There's a very good point that you just made, Jared. We're getting into the weeds a little bit, Sway and Heather, about this, and everybody listening. But what's happening now? Wanda James and Scott Duran, you probably know them, Jared, out there. They're in Denver, the first black dispensary owners in the country, and they're in Denver, and they're still there and they're still fighting. But what they'll tell you, and we interview them in the documentary, and Wanda got into this business because her brother was arrested for marijuana in Texas. And what they did in Texas was, while he was in jail, serving several years in jail for having marijuana, just smoking marijuana, not like selling it or a big amount, they had him picking cotton in the field. And that was what they did to the prisoners in Texas when he smoked marijuana, so for getting caught with smoking marijuana. So you have all these black people in Texas picking cotton in the field. And she saw her brother being a slave. So she started speaking out about this. And then she started getting involved in the cannabis business and was the first black dispensary and cannabis business in the country from Colorado. Fast forward to today, all of the business owners we talked to, Be Real, who has a dispensary, Berner, who's the owner of the Cookies brand, Wanda and Al Harrington, they talk about the slim margin because they're very heavily taxed. But the problem with that is when you look at that, that's only benefiting the big corporations who are coming in because these small companies can't keep up in this business with these such slim margins. So they're trying to starve them out. Big corporations can come in and drop the prices and then starve these people out who have one or two dispensaries in the state. Starve them out, and then next thing you know, they raise the prices and kick them out. And that's the way we're going if we don't do something about it here.
Hey, Jared, thank you for your call. You're one of our resident attorneys. He's
yes,
he's our medicinal, our cannabis attorney. Jared, thank you. You're a citizen. And
absolutely.
You know, Eric, and the other thing we haven't even talked about is the genetics, you know, of the strand and who's growing it, you know, and how genetics can be manipulated, and what are you actually utilizing? Do you know the person? Do you know the soil they use? Do you know what I mean? Like, do you know what process they use? Did they expedite the growth process? Did they let it go natural? Did they step on it? They give it a flavor? You know what I mean? Or give it some potency?
You know, it's funny. I learned so much about that. We only talk about that a slight bit in the film because there's so many issues to discuss. But I know people are interested in that, the connoisseurs. But I learned so much about that, particularly like talking with Berner and going into his grow. The film opens, we're inside Berner's grow, so we're all wearing masks and blue, these like look like we're about to do surgery, and they're chopping up all of the, they're cutting up all of the buds and that sort of thing. And we're inside his grow, and I learned so much about it. He has the Girl Scout cookie strain, and cookies makes up maybe about 60% of the strains that are out there, according to Berner. So what they do is they take some strain and somebody will marry it with their own, and then they grow it. But, the thing to get at this moment is that because it's not federally regulated, it's state regulated, you can't know what you're getting from state to state. So it's different regulations for different states. But I do say that most people who are growing this are very serious about it. They're really marijuana nerds who are just like straight fiendish when it comes to their growing facilities.
You know, Erik Parker is here. Give him a round of applause. And tonight is the documentary is called Smoke, Marijuana Plus Black America, 10 p.m. on BET. It's narrated and EP'd by Nas, who is an advocate, obviously, of the cannabis industry.
He was in that chocolate era, Sway.
He's from the chocolate tie era that Heather was the queen of. Nas just never let it go. Hey, but you have so many amazing callers. Jeremy in Nebraska, his friend was locked up for 33 years for having 14 grams of marijuana. Lanisha from Compton, her husband got his license taken away from him and been going through a case for the last 8 years. Cedric in Sacramento, Otis in Arizona. All these folks, Art in Denver, Jason in Detroit, Troy in Chicago, McQueen in Ohio. I want them to hit you up directly, Erik, and anything you could share with them about your findings while doing this doc, or you might even came across some information that might be beneficial to them, or they just might want to hear your feedback, man. How can they reach you if they want to hit you directly on social?
I'm at Erik G. Parker, ERIK G PARKER That's ErikGParker. And that's it, all social handles. I definitely will respond back if you inbox me or message me in some way or another.
All right. Congratulations, man. You do nothing but quality work. You're an asset to our lives, to our culture, to the community. I love the stories you're telling and the way you're telling them, Erik. Thank you. I appreciate you, brother.
Thank you. God bless you, Sway, and have a D. Peace.
God bless
Absolutely.
you as well.
Erik Parker right there, man.